Worldwide, there, I think, is a quite distinct English and American stream to wargaming. Things like Black Powder, for instance, is a very English wargame. The rules are very loose. It's a gentleman's game sort of thing. You need to be talking to your opponent and deciding what should really be happening here. Two Fat Lardies rules are another example of that, where there are no rules for a lot of things. It's, so what do you think this is? Is this an easy shot? Yeah, that's an easy shot, take it, sort of thing. And then there's a much more American style game, which at the extreme you've got things like squad leader, advanced squad leader, and Starfleet battles, where you've got, you know, the 1.1.1.1. And so there are two distinct sort of underlying styles that have developed. In board gaming, there's very much the German style and American style games as well. So it's just a different thing. So without a doubt, there are different approaches to wargaming in the two places.
From my point of view, it does seem that there is a difference between different regions of how they play Flames of War, or just how they set up their games possibly. Or you even got kind of themes that you'll have. It seems to be quite tank heavy in the States. I'm not sure if that's all the time, but it does seem, the tournament scene does seem to be quite tank orientated. While here we've gone through phases. Australia is very similar to New Zealand, I think. I haven't got much experience with the UK scene at all, but I'm sure they've got a different bend on things as well.
I think that the way that the terrain is laid out really defines how you're going to play your game. I think it's really interesting, one of the things coming from the US to here, because I used to set up tables a lot back at my own club back home, and when I came here for the first time, and I set up a table, and Phil was looking at it, he's like, wow, that's a pretty intense table. and I said, well, you know, this is what we set up. And he's like, well, you know, you start looking at some of the maps and stuff like that, there's a lot more fields of fire and stuff like that, but your table doesn't seem to have very many of those. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So you learn a little bit about how European battlefields, because I think when I was putting together boards and things, I was thinking in my head, this is what a battlefield would look like where I was with my frame of reference, you know. And so this is, you know, like if World War II was fought in North Idaho, this is what the battlefield would look like. And I think there was a little bit of that kind of subtly entering the way that I was assembling my battlefield. Again, our games just play differently as a result, and so it's good to have that kind of perspective and know that, you know, people have been setting up boards for a long time, and so they play on what they know.
Different terrain is very much favours different types of armies. I mean, a very simple example, if you fill a table with very difficult going woods, it's going to strongly favour infantry armies over armoured forces. If you have a totally flat, empty battlefield, it's going to strongly favour forces that can manoeuvre and so forth. It's when you get in the middle, though, it's the detail that decides whether or not this particular table is going to favour this type of table player, or this type of player, or this type of force, or this type of force. So people often think it's about the amount of terrain on the table, and it's not. It's about what you do with that terrain. So one of the stylistic differences I've noticed is that in the English stream, we tend to see clusters of stuff. So you'll see a wood here extending like this with no passage through it. It's a big wood. And then you'll see a village. And European villages are quite tight-packed compared with our modern colonial style stuff. You know, houses touch each other, and, you know, it's really quite dense. And then they walk out to the fields around, compared with New Zealand and in America, where you've got a farmhouse here with its farm around it, and then a few miles down the road a farmhouse with a farm around it. In Europe, there's your village, and then all the farmland around the village. At the other extreme, you get terrain where you've got a piece of terrain here, a piece of terrain here, a piece of terrain here, a piece of terrain here. And that actually favours tanks dramatically, and it favours fast and medium tanks specifically. It doesn't favour tanks with big guns, and it doesn't favour infantry. Yep, infantry can hop from point to point, but there's no fields of fire for their supporting weapons, because infantry have relatively few supporting weapons. And they rely on those few supporting weapons being able to dominate a space of ground so that the infantry can operate safely in there. But if they've got no field of fire, then the infantry's relatively few supporting weapons have a very, very small part, and so the infantry tend to be operating on their own unsupported. Whereas tanks, if you've got a wood, a gap, a wood, a gap, a wood, a gap, they can just race through full speed, never slowing down, always concealed, and choosing when they pop out to shoot. So it just, whichever you go, or however you set up a table, every table is always going to favour somebody or not somebody.
Well, yeah, the tournament scenes, it's interesting how they do vary between regions, and it's really, and a lot of times you can actually see that come out in a lot of the after action photos and stuff. And I think after each of the big events that happen, the design team kind of really reviews those photos and has a good look at like the boards and stuff, because I think one of the differences is how people set up their boards. And so a lot of that is of immense interest to us as a design team to see how it's being played out. We look at the results and say, all right, well, that's interesting. Mechanized forces are doing better here, and infantry forces are doing better there. We take that into consideration as well. So, but yeah, there's definitely different ways that different regions play the game, and it's not any worse or better or anything like that. But it's something that definitely needs to be considered.
We're trying to design to encompass the whole package, rather than being a little too focused on the English stream of wargaming as perhaps we started.